Good afternoon, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Council Cabinet meeting, Derby City Council, on Wednesday the 10th of February 2021. I'm going to go straight to the agenda and go to item 1, which is any apologies, please, Karen?
I've got apologies from Connie Spencer, the Youth Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, any late items?
There are none.
Item 3 is receipt of any petitions. I don't believe there are any.
There are none.
Item 4 is identification of urgent items to which call-in will not apply.
There are none.
There are none of those either. Okay. So declarations of interest, please.
Can I declare an interest in item 10, the adult social care fees and charges, as I'm a trustee of Liversidge Trust and the chair of their care home? Can I make it clear that I've not participated in any discussions or had any part in preparing this paper?
Duly noted, Councillor Webb. Thank you very much.
Can
Any
I
other
also
declarations?
can I also make a declaration in relation to item 11, Councillor Barker? That relates to the refurbishment of the Market Hall, and I am a director of NABMAR, National Association of British Market Authorities, who have been engaged at some stage in advising on the interior of the marketplace. Again, I have no pecuniary interest in that role.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. Any other declarations? No. Item 6 then is the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of January. And Mr. Squires, I think there's a slight clerical complication I think you need to explain in relation to these.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We need to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of January, but this needs to be subject to the inclusion of the approval of the minutes of the meetings held on 9 and 16 December 2020. That was omitted from the minutes and that correction needs to be made. Thank you.
Okay, so with that qualification then, Cabinet, are we happy to approve the minutes?
Approve.
Thank you.
Approved.
Agreed.
Okay, in that case then we'll move to item 7, which is the recommendations for Executive Scrutiny Board, which I propose to deal with in the normal fashion by dealing with any recommendations from the board alongside it whilst we're discussing any of the items on the agenda, other than the fact, of course, there was a call-in procedure at last night's meeting. When do we is now the appropriate time to deal with that, Karen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Stephen, are you with us? Have we got a copy of the minute extract from last night's scrutiny board meeting in relation to the call-in?
Chair, I'll just display that on the call for you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Clearly the call-in was discussed on 2 counts at last night's corporate scrutiny meeting. Cabinet member responsible, Councillor Williams, responded to the questions from the panel members and due consideration was given to those 2 aspects of the call-in. So there were 2 decisions to be taken, one in respect of, just getting down to them. So there was consideration in relation to a suggestion that the members of the board were asked to individually state whether they felt the following principle of decision making had been breached. And the first one was in relation to clarity of aims and desired outcomes. Members found that there had been a breach of this principle of the decision-making process. Members were also asked, of the board were also asked if they if they would individually state whether they felt the following principle of decision had been breached, and that was in relation to the relevant issues not having appeared to have been taken into consideration. No breach was found there. So we have a finding of breach in relation to procedure from the scrutiny board in relation to the clarity of aims and desired outcomes. Councillor Williams, you responded to the calling questions from members of the council last night. Do you want to speak first in relation to the finding, or would you want to hear from any members present tonight that want to follow up on in relation to that calling process and reserve your right to respond?
I'm happy to do as you tell me, Chair.
Okay.
Whichever order you'd like me to.
Well, let's take any representations from group leaders and the chair of scrutiny first, then, and then you can respond as you did last night to any points that are raised. Can I just point out, though, that this is not a scrutiny board meeting. We're not here to go over all the principles or all the relevant points all the points in relation to the free school meals or the HAF programme. What we're about to discuss is, and we'd like to hear from people, their rationale and the reasons for finding that there was a breach in relation to the clarity of aims and desired outcomes. So if members would restrict their comments to that particular aspect, then I'd appreciate it. So do we have any indications who would like to speak?
Yes, please.
Yes, Councillor Repton. Chair, do you want to introduce? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Repton.
Yes, as you see, that the breach was discussed at length and deliberated on last night, and it was found to have actually occurred. And this relates to the frustration of the will of the whole of the council, which wanted to see the comprehensive use of vouchers. And the comment was made last night that sadly the Victorian notion of the deserving poor and the undeserving poor seem to be alive and well.
Councillor Repton, sorry to stop you as you've just started, but I did mention, can you restrict your comments to the clarity of aims and necessary outcomes, please?
Yes, it was found that they were in breach, and I was just explaining what happened at the meeting, which backed that up. The frustration.
In what way was there a finding of breach? What particular aspects were of concern to the scrutiny committee, please?
The clarity of aims and desired outcomes have not been provided.
Okay. Did you want to detail those that have not been provided?
Well, I've tried to explain, and you just shut the argument down, so I don't know what you actually want.
I just wanted you to explain how the committee came to find, in particular, in relation to clarity of aims and outcomes.
Because it's centred around the fact that the will of the council had been frustrated, a motion had actually been passed. It was felt that the voucher scheme ought to have been comprehensively rolled out, and it was stigmatising for the poor or the people in the city who are on very restricted means. And after debate, the breach was found. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Councillor Shanker,
yes, please.
you've indicated. Councillor Shanker.
Thank you, Councillor Bolter. Yeah. I mean, it's disappointing we're in this position in the first place, having to call in a decision, and then the exec scrutiny having to do the work it did yesterday to find the breach, and then we're back here at another cabinet meeting, and I'll try my best not to go into the detail of the report and just concentrate my contribution around why I felt the arguments in favour that a breach had occurred was agreed by the exec scrutiny meeting. And I go back to the three simple questions which were asked at this meeting chaired by your deputy last month, and the answers which we were given at that meeting by senior officers and cabinet members. Them questions were posed again yesterday to try and gain that clarity, and again, rather than gaining clarity, there's more confusion. We simply asked out of the 10,000 children, potentially 10,000 children who could attend the HAF programs, how many have been provisioned for? And we don't get an answer for that because there's not been that level of planning gone in to be able to allow you to make an informed decision. So that's why there's a lack of clarity around that. We also asked at the meeting last month and again yesterday, is if somebody can't attend the HAF club, will they be entitled to ask for a free school meal voucher during the holiday period? And we were quite clearly told, the recordings back that up and they were quoted yesterday, we were told anybody who can't attend the programme can ask for a free school meal voucher. But yesterday, yesterday, exactly, Councillor Williams, just bear with me. Yesterday, Councillor Williams said, no, that's not the case. They'd be referred to the food programme. But at the previous meeting, it's on record. You can go and check. It's not me making this up. It's on record. We were told they could apply for a voucher. So this is where the confusion's coming from, and this is why, rightly so, the committee has found a breach. So what is the policy? Even at this stage, it's still not clear, Chair.
So what was the third question? Does that relate to clarity of aims and outcomes?
Absolutely. And the third question, which what was answered, I would say, but it's still not clear in the report, is around what would happen during those weeks where there's no provisions, or those days where there's no provisions of an activity. All 10,000 children, and I've spoke to the Food for Thought programme, who do an excellent job in the city, they just would not be able to cope if the families of all the children who need the help relied on the Food for Thought programme for the help. They just would not be able to support them.
Okay, thank you. So it's the same three questions, Councillor Williams, that you've answered previously and answered last night. Are you satisfied that the report contains sufficient clarity on those 3 points, and do you wish to go over the answers again in relation to those 3 points?
I do wish to make some points, Chair, if I may. So Councillor Repton said under the aims and desired outcomes that the reason why some councillors found that in breach was frustration of the not using the school vouchers during non-term times, and the frustration of the members in not following the will of the council. As I explained last night, that although a resolution was passed by full council, it is actually because of the amount that was contained in that, and that it would possibly be, it is deemed a key decision, therefore it has to come back to Cabinet. I carefully then took the Scrutiny Commission through all of the financial issues surrounding that and the reasons why I felt that that could not be done in terms of the financial cost and ongoing use of reserves, and not being able to actually know how much it was going to cost due to things like not knowing the universal credit, not knowing whether there was going to be more lockdowns, not knowing how many more children would be on free school meals, and that is not really an acceptable way to use the finances of the council. I took them all through that. I then took them through the process in terms of how best to ensure that no child would go hungry, and to try and come up with a system that would allow that. It's all in the documentation. The proposals were then about combining the use of the HAF and the use of vouchers, and I think this is where Councillor Shanker might be confused. Vouchers will be issued during the 2 half terms as stated in the report, but during the time frame for the HAF, it's about accessing the programmes that are put on, or getting support from Food for Thought. Now, Food for Thought may do, as I explained last night, different styles. They may do food parcels. It may be a combination of food parcels and vouchers. That was all explained last night. It's all in the report. I think I took them through the report, I took them through the motion line by line, and I understand the frustration that councillors may have had, but they know what the current system is with the council. They know that we have this form of model for deciding key decisions, and they should have taken that into consideration. I also took them through all of the aims and objectives in terms of having a look at longer term outcomes for children and their families. So I, as you might expect, do disagree with the Scrutiny Commission's findings. I know it's all in the report. I understand it. I am saddened that other people are not being able to listen to what was put in front of them. It isn't about the frustration of the will of the councillors. This was about the process and the procedures followed. I believe that it's all in the report. I believe I've explained that report adequately. I've given the details that we can give because it is absolutely essential that the HAF programme is designed properly and appropriately. And of course, I'm not going to give figures that I cannot possibly know because it's in the design phase. And it saddens me that Councillor Baggy Shankar does not understand that. So I would ask the Cabinet to consider my recommendation, that I believe that I have taken due consideration of the aims and desired outcomes, that I have taken through the report. It is all in the report, and again, I explained it last night.
Okay, thank you. So, Cabinet members, is there anybody that's not clear on the desired outcomes from this paper left, or any wants to make any comment or any questions in relation to the call in last night, please?
Councillor Poulter, if I could just mention, I think Councillor Shankar picked up on his understanding of food for thought, and I think it's one of the most important things to identify there is food for thought is an alliance system with many different people and community groups coming into that, and I think we're missing the point here in the fact that there are anything from the Pakistani community centres involvement to the Revive Clinic. There are so many elements that have been brought into this, and I think that's some sort of fantastic work. And I do believe that with the right support and in partnership with the council, that they will be able to achieve the support for those that do not attend the school half-term events, if you like. So I would decline to disagree with. I would disagree with Councillor Shankar that there isn't that facility there, because actually our community groups have really stepped up, and this is a one of the good things that has come out of COVID and the impact of that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shankar, being as we've not had too long on this yet, then yes, you can come back in briefly on this if you any further clarification.
How can I help? Just touching on the last part there, it's quite ironic, isn't it? Councillor Orlston's trying to give me lectures about my understanding. The HAF programme, as she just referred to as running during the half term during the half term, it isn't running during the half term. It's running at Easter and the summer holidays. So if there's a lack of understanding, it still prevails.
My apologies, Councillor Shankar. I'd just like to correct myself there. Yep, that was a fraudulent slip on my part. I personally refer to all school holidays as half terms, which is incorrect on my behalf, and I apologise for that. But it does not detract from what I was trying to explain to you, which was extremely clear, and trying constantly to try and draw out on people's individual ways of referring to things and trying to criticise is really not coming off you.
Just put in whenever you feel like.
Sorry, before we carry on. Before we carry on, can I, Councillor Wood, can you just make sure you're muted, please? We're picking up bits of conversation. Councillor Shankar, carry on, but please don't let's get into semantics again over the odd words. We've had some of that already today. If there's any questions or queries you've got in relation to clarification on what Councillor Williams has said, Go ahead, please.
Okay, so my only response to Councillor Williams was that she's referred to everything being in the report. And I don't want to get into your semantics again, and everything obviously isn't in the report, but the key bit of information here is whether free school meal vouchers will be provided in weeks, not just the 2 half-term weeks. Could she refer me to the part in the report where that is detailed, please?
Okay. Councillor Williams, do you want to explain again? Or are you happy with your explanation so far?
As I said previously, the will of the council on this part in putting out free school meal vouchers throughout the whole of the school holidays for 2021 cannot be done. It is quite clear.
Okay. So, in the absence of any other contributions, Cabinet, are you all content that you are clear about the outcomes, the desired outcomes from this report? Do you, on the back of the finding by the scrutiny board, do you feel you want to change anything in the paper or not? So the question, I guess, is, are you content with the report as it stands, Cabinet?
Yes.
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 Absolutely.
Thank you. So therefore the finding by the scrutiny board is therefore rejected, and we don't need to take any further action. Okay, so that completes item 7. Other than any other recommendations from last night, we'll deal with as we go through the key decisions. Is Priya with us? Is the mayor here? The youth mayor here? Are you there, Priya?
Yeah, I'm here.
Priya, I understand you've indicated, you asked if you can speak on a couple of these items. I think that items 11 and 15. But if you want to speak in the course of any of these items, just indicate in the chat bar. But I'll try and bring you in where you've suggested you might want to comment on items 11 and 15. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cheers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for attending again. I appreciate that. So item 8 then is the determined school admission arrangements for Derby City maintained and volunteer controlled schools. Is that you, Andy? Is Andy here with us? Are you there, Andy Smith?
Chair, I believe that... Oh.
Can you hear me, Chair?
I can now, yes.
Right, okay. So this is a standard report that comes to Cabinet every year. The Council is the admissions authority for all maintained and voluntary controlled schools, which means we have a statutory duty to consult on any changes to admission arrangements in readiness to publish the arrangements by the deadline, which is the 28th of February. A 6-week consultation was carried out and there were no objections or comments relating to the proposed admission arrangements. There are no changes to the proposed admission arrangements for 2022-23 from those determined last year for 21-22, and that's attached to Appendix 1 in the report. Derby's proposed admission arrangements are consistent with other local authorities, so I'd ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations outlined in 2.1 and 2.2.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, contributions in relation to this item? In that case, I think executive scrutiny looked at this, considered it last night, but resolved to note the report, if I'm not mistaken. Good. Okay. Cabinet, are you okay with this to agree 2.1 and 2.2 in relation to item 8, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, good. Moving to
Chair, it's Emily, and just to let you know that I'm afraid I've lost connection at home, so if you can see an identified number on the screen, that is me joining the call.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I was going to say let us know if you have any more problems, but if you have any more problems, you won't be able to let us know, will you?
I won't. Hopefully I'll be back online soon.
That'd be counterproductive, wouldn't it? Okay, so we're going to move on then to item 9. and that is in relation to the granting of an easement to permit surface water discharge onto land owned by Derby City Council. Who's going to be doing this one? Is it you, Steve Kaplan?
Yes, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair, councillors, colleagues, and any members of the public. My name is Stephen Kaplan. I'm the Director of Property Services at the Council. I'm bringing this paper this afternoon to the Cabinet, seeking authority to enter an easement agreement over land owned by the Council for the discharge of surface water pursuant to the planning application that releases land for up to 800 new houses in the Snelsmoor area. It is a decision of the Cabinet because the value of the transaction exceeds £250,000, and the amount that we have negotiated as a payment to discharge the water onto the land owned by the Council is contained in the body of the paper and is £400,000. We have agreed this in principle, and fellow officers in our valuation teams have agreed this does represent good value for the Council and meets our statutory obligations of best consideration, which are required even for an easement, which is a permission to do something over land. It is not the sale or disposal of land per se. The recommendations are set out in the paper, giving delegation effectively to my office to conclude the transaction in accordance with the items in the supporting information. There are two plans attached to the paper which set out the wider scheme of those 800 units, which also includes land for a school, and the area covered by the culvert where the water will be discharged. The discharge of the water is agreed in principle with the Council's drainage engineers and advisors being the most suitable and appropriate area for water discharge, and they will consider items such as flooding, risk and so forth as part of the planning process. Other items of consideration include obviously our commitment to climate impact, and any pollution items would be picked up in the easement arrangements. I'm happy to take any questions, Leader. Chair.
So, as invited, any questions or comments in relation to this item?
Just one very quick question. Sorry.
Go on, is that Councillor Schenker?
Yeah, just one very quick question for Steve. Steve, the seems to be a good piece of work and good income coming into the council for the use of the land. Has the receipt of this money been allocated to be spent anywhere in the MTPF?
My information from finance colleagues is it is not allocated within the MTPF currently. However, I note Simon Riley obviously is the Section 151 officer, and he would be able to verify that if so required. But I believe from speaking to Alison Parkin, Director of Finance at the moment, that it is not currently allocated within the medium-term financial plan.
Thanks, Steve.
But of course there may be restrictions or limitations on what it could be spent on, which would need to be clarified when any suggestions came forward.
Chair, I can confirm that we have not agreed any restrictions with the developer, so it's not linked to Section 106, for instance. This is a land transaction. Those discussions were held, but we've made sure this income is not ring-fenced as part of the transaction, if that helps clarification.
It does, Steve, but the issue of capital versus revenue still applies, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be a matter for our finance colleagues.
Simon, did you want to comment on that at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think Steve and yourself has highlighted that this would be treated as capital in our view and has not been applied.
Okay, good. Any other questions, contributions?
Yes, please, Chair.
Webb, yes.
Yes, I've raised some questions on this report before in the production of it. I just want to be assured that our planning processes as part of this will ensure that water quality is maintained and that flood provision through whatever system is adopted will maintain the quality of the area and the quality of the water entering into the water courses. It's a particular interest of mine, having been flooded many years ago, and I just want to ensure that we as a local authority are confident, even though we are allowing this easement, that any future development of this land will ensure quality and safety over the distribution of water along this site.
Chair, thank you. It was my intention to email my colleagues as the Director of Planning on approval of this paper to pick up on those exact points to ensure that any matters relating to pollution, quality of water and flooding are fully addressed, both in the legal agreements and in the planning. I fully intend to do that, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay, any other queries, comments? In that case, with two recommendations again, 2.1 and 2.2. Can they be agreed, Cabinet? I'm just sorry, just before we do that, Alex, I can't get past the report on the call-in from last night. So I don't believe there are any recommendations in relation to this item.
That's correct, Chair. I'll display the recommendations for the ones that do arise, but I don't think they are for this item or the next one, in fact.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So, Cabinet, can we agree item recommendations 2.1 and 2.2?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. In that case, we can move on to item 10, adult social care fees and charges. Again, will that be Andy Smith?
Yes, thanks, Chair. And you can hear me, yes?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The Council has a legal duty under the Care Act 2014 to annually set a fair price for purchasing adult social care, adult care services rather, from the local provider market. In order to do this, the Council consults with the provider sector annually about their cost pressures. This report sets out details of the funding model and proposed rates for 21-22 for standard residential nursing care and for home care services. We take this report to Cabinet every year in February in readiness for any changes to be implemented in April. The Council builds in identified legitimate cost pressures into the care cost model agreed with the sector. The main cost pressures were an assumed increase in the national living wage. COVID-19 related cost pressures were also mentioned by some providers in the consultation. This is not covered in the report because additional government funding has been available to support COVID-19 cost pressures and been passported as appropriate to the sector. The new fees and charging rates will be applicable from the 12th of April, which coincides with the date of DWP rate increases. I would ask Cabinet to approve recommendations 2.1 to 2.6.
Thank you very much. Alex, just confirm there were no recommendations from last night.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Any other contributions, questions from leaders or Cabinet? No. In that case then, as requested, can we agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.6, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Which takes us to item 11, and that's the Future High Streets Fund revised programme. So who's going to take this one? Is it David?
Chair, it is. Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you. Yes, this report summarises our approach to reducing the funding envelope for the Future High Streets Fund bid that we made back in June of last year. We applied for 21.75 million. The offer in principle that we've received is for 15 million. That was confirmed in December. We now need to submit a revised proposal, revised programme by the 26th of this month. And we've been through various options to try to reduce the overall cost, and we've now focused on, as you can see within the report, two particular projects, which is the Market Hall refurbishment and the Eastern Gateway, which is the scheme which improves the environment around the bus station linking to the Eagle Market and the Eagle Centre. And we now have to submit the revised proposal by the 26th of this month, and the recommendations in the report are to approve the revised programme, delegate authority so that we can fine-tune the proposal before it gets submitted to government at the end of this month, acceptance of the funding conditions, and also just that the individual projects are brought back to Cabinet to be added to the capital programme when the detailed proposals are available.
Thank you very much. Councillor Repton's indicated, and I guess that's on the back of the fact that there were two recommendations. If you could put them up, Alex. I'll introduce them and then invite Councillor Repton to speak on those. So the first one is to welcome the fact that advice from a low carbon energy specialist has been included for the market hall, and quite rightly that's decarbonisation and low carbon is embedded across our actions in relation to particularly the recovery programme, but in everything we do at Derby City Council, so that's well noted and accepted. And the second one is to recommend to Council Cabinet that it writes to government to call on it to formulate a properly funded rescue plan to save our cities. So I take that we should be asking to for the government to develop a rescue plan for Nottingham City Council. I think probably they'd be well capable of doing that for themselves, but I think it's right to highlight the fact that there are many ways in which government supported Derby in recent years, not least through OCOR, through the Silt Mill, through Smart Park, through Infinity Park, through Beckett Well, etc. David, I think maybe you might just want to go through some of the ways in which government are already supporting us, and whether you think there's any value in writing to the government to extend that when in the face of two further funds, the Shared Prosperity Fund and the Levelling Up Fund, which we will be bidding into. David, to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think yes, I think that it was announced in the spending review in the latter part of last year that the next two tranches of significant funding for the regeneration of places, including cities, will be the Levelling Up Fund. That will be a capital fund. We're now putting effort into actually wanting to we're now putting effort into trying to identify the projects that might be contenders for Derby to actually put forward for the Levelling Up Fund, and then probably in the spring will be more details on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is the UK's effectively replacement for the EU funding programme, which is likely, if it does mirror the EU programme, it will probably be a mix of revenue and capital funding. And again, we need to start thinking about what proposals might be relevant for Derby in that context. I think from our perspective as officers, I think our efforts need, certainly in the short term, to go into starting to create a pipeline of contenders for those two funds. I think that's probably what we'll be doing in the next few weeks.
Thank you, David. Sorry, Martin, I should have given you the opportunity to present the board's rationale behind this recommendation. So over to you, and then I'll bring in Priya.
Why I said cities, because sadly our efforts locally on their own are not enough. It'll be a bit like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The problem, as we all know, is there's been a move towards online shopping, and this has been accelerated during COVID. And I think we will struggle with our own efforts to repair the damage that this has done. We have over 30% empty shops in the town centres, and I'm an eternal optimist, but I think the situation could get worse. And that's why we need the government to actually have a strategy nationally to work alongside all the valiant efforts that we're doing locally to make sure it's a success. And it won't just be Derby. We need to be working alongside other local authorities as well, because all towns and cities throughout the whole country are facing the same challenges. And if we think individually on our own can buck the trend, I think we're steadily deluding ourselves. What we need to look at are some of the two elephants in the rooms, which we can't touch, and that's business rates and rents. A lot of those rents are tied into pension funds, but unless they're looked at seriously and reduced, we'll not attract the niche shopping offers that we all need and want to see in the city centre to replace the likes of Burton, Topshop, Debenhams, which have all gone and won't come back, sadly. So I do genuinely believe in a cross-party way we'll support any efforts to work with you and the government and other cities to try to address this real problem. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Martin. And I would agree with you. It's not a unique problem for Derby. It's a problem for towns and cities, as you say, across the country. But I would argue that government have and are still trying to make provision to support towns and cities through a variety of funding, like the high street funding, high street futures funding we're going to be talking about now, but also towns funds and connecting cities funding and support for leisure culture and such things. So really it is alongside, we need as an authority to do our utmost to promote what Derby needs, because you're right, retail isn't going to be the problem in Derby in the future, because retail isn't coming back as we knew it. So we have to repurpose the city centre, and we're well on course to be working towards that end. So thank you for your contributions there. Priya, you've indicated you'd like to make a comment or a question in relation to this item.
Yeah, so I'm not sure actually who's the best place to answer it, but just to bounce off what you've just said about refurbishing the city, just information, not right now, but about how we can be involved, and we as in me and Connie, but we as in young people as well. You know, we have the youth council, which you can come in and talk to us about anything. So we just wanted to make that clear, that it's actually for young people quite an exciting time. You know, there's different projects going on, and the general consensus is that we want to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. It's a great point. We should not forget that the city centre is of interest to all generations, and not least yourselves, because it's the younger generation we need to attract in alongside everybody else into the city. So whilst we are consulting with partners through a variety of means, then we absolutely shouldn't forget our younger generation. Are you still able to hold your meetings at the moment, Priya, or have they been suspended for the time being? Are you doing anything online?
Yeah, so we've got monthly meetings online at the minute via Zoom.
Okay, so David, I'm sure we can arrange to have some input into those monthly meetings and get the perspective of the city's younger people who are taking the trouble to come out and talk to us.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. And I also think, Priya, it would be good to connect you with the officers in the City Council who are leading on the refresh of the master planning of the city centre, because one of the key agendas is going to be how we bring more living into the city, more culture into the city, as well as we'll need some retail, but clearly retail is it needs to be part of the mix, but it can't be the foundation of the city centre in the future. So I think everything around workspace, culture, leisure, living, it would be fascinating to understand what younger people think about what nature of environment we want in the city centre. So I can pick that up through the officers that are leading on that and make sure the Youth Council is one of the mechanisms we use for that discussion. I think that would be a really interesting discussion.
Okay, good. Does that answer your question, Priya?
It does, yeah. Thank you, Chair.
No problem.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I just interject there? Because the Voices in Action Youth Council has been discussed here, can I just declare an interest in that my daughter is actually a member of Voices in Action? She doesn't agree with anything I want to do, so I don't think there's any pecuniary interest there. She's a teenager and she has her own voice. She's a strong, dominant female, and I'm proud of her. But just to declare that interest there.
I guess I should too also declare, in that circumstances, declare that my granddaughter also takes part in those very same meetings, and she and your daughter Yvonne are very similar, at the same pod, I think. But there you go. Right, so Councillor Skelton, you wanted to come in?
Thank you. Just really a question. I understand that NABMAR, the consultancy or arm of NABMAR, has done a report, I presume, on the future that they would recommend for the market hall. Am I right in thinking that?
Well, I'll let David talk to that, but yes and no, I think is the brief answer. David, are you in a position to explain NABMAR's involvement so far?
Well, it's just the consultant. This is a report, a consultancy report has been written on the market hall.
Yes, we're in relation to the market hall. The detail of the refurbishment and the repurposing of the market hall is actively work in progress, using the architect's expertise and their own expertise in relation to shaping what it needs to look like to become the vibrant and different and repurposed market hall that we all want and need it to be. And yes, NABMAR have been part and parcel of that so far. David or anybody, did you want to, maybe Simon, you were leading on the market hall now. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you. So as part of a phase 2 planning for the Future High Streets Fund, sort of a consultancy support alongside architectural support was developed in helping to shape the vision. Now that we're committing to the scheme as planned for that, the outcomes of both of those reports will be used to inform the phase 2 of the market hall.
Right, yeah, because what I was going to come on to say was obviously the revised programme in some ways obviously cuts back on what we were hoping to be spending. Does obviously what is going to be planned now with the market hall mean that we've got to in any way sort of compromise on what we wanted to do originally because of the less funding that we got now?
I think the short answer to that, Ruth, is we unfortunately can't tell the future. That's part and parcel of the working process, but I can assure you that this cabinet will be pressing for and aiming for and delivering the best possible outcome for the second phase of the market hall renewal and repurpose. Simon, was there anything you wanted to add?
I think I'd support the leader that David highlighted that the market hall along with the Eastern Gateway remain priorities in here. There was an option to scale back all projects, that wasn't taken. But as with all of these projects, and I think Councillor Skelton understands that design goes through a number of stages, REBA stages, and as we now commit to this next stage, we will be refining and updating the cost projections and the delivery projections. Now we're committed and we've got the funding. Thank you.
And just sort of a little bit more, obviously the funding is tighter now that we've got less. I presume we are still keeping a very careful eye on any risk elements where things might go awry or anything like that. So we do keep things very tight.
Well, in relation to that, Ruth, one is not any less in relation to the market hall, because what we've done, rather than trimming the funding for all the projects, then we've reviewed the projects that we're going to follow through on, and some of them will not be pursued at this time, with a view to focusing and delivering on the market hall and the Eastern Gateway, as Simon says. Okay, so I think Councillor Shanker, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points and a couple of questions, if I may. Absolutely disappointing not to get the full funding, but that wasn't a decision taken by anybody on this call. So we're probably in a position where we have to accept where we are on that. A little bit disappointing, or more disappointing, in the report that the digital infrastructure for the city centre isn't going ahead, but it's described as not being transformational change. I think that's absolutely wrong. I think having a good digital infrastructure in the city centre can actually lead to that transformational change, not just for the residents of Derby, young people of Derby, visitors to Derby. So I do hope we can fund that project somehow in the near future to be able to give the city centre a much needed boost that it needs. Second point is around the letter to reduce the risk of not getting the matched funding on, I think it's described as the Eastern Gateway. Do we know if we've managed to receive that letter from the Derbyan Centre? And then finally, it'd be remiss of me if I didn't make the point, now that we have got funding in place to deliver the change needed and the repurposing in the Market Hall, are we going to get down to the detail and let the people of Derby know what this significant investment in our Market Hall is actually going to deliver, or are we going to still keep referring to reports where it doesn't actually give a detailed breakdown of the scope, it doesn't give a detailed breakdown of the benefit of doing what we're doing? Because I think more and more people would just like to know what circa £25 million invested on this great building will actually deliver for the city.
Last point first, Councillor Shanker. Yes, of course we're going to let people know what the plan is in relation to the Market Hall when we've finished the plan. As has been described to you, Reba stage that we're at, it's work in progress. In relation to the amount that we've been awarded, we're not unique in any way, shape or form. The vast majority of the bids to the Future High Streets Fund were trimmed to 69% of what people bid for. It's exactly what we got, and where it's in line with other authorities that bid into this funding. And finally, the digital aspect of it, yes, it's disappointing, but we had to make decisions, and the digital agenda has certainly not been lost. I agree. It's vital to us. There are and will be continued plans to resurrect that project, and with City Fibre coming and starting work in the city, then we're on the front foot with that as well. So, Simon, are you able to answer in relation to the question about Cale Street?
David Fletcher is having the discussion, so if maybe David could respond to that.
Yeah, I was just Emma is on the call, who's the officer liaising with Cale Street. So I don't know, Emma, if we've actually received that. We had a meeting earlier this week with Cale Street.
We haven't had the letter yet, but we have had a number of conversations and correspondence about the content of that letter and how they can support us in making the best case with our revised programme, and they have agreed to provide us with a letter of support.
The really critical point to make here is, and I'll just go back, Councillor Shanker, to your point about the level of funding we've secured. There were 57 locations that received provisional offers. All of those were at 69% of what they originally applied for. So there was, in a sense, Derby got what 56 other locations were offered. What we now need to do is turn that into in principle offer into a firm offer, and we need to make sure the proposal we put in on the 26th or before that is compliant with all the government's requirements. So we need to make sure the match funding letter from Cale Street aligns again with the government's requirements. We just need to make sure it's a completely compliant programme that we submit. So that's why Emma's been liaising on the actual detail of what goes in that Cale Street letter. But there is certainly every indication that they want to proceed with that Eastern Gateway project. It's an absolutely critical part of their future plans.
Okay, thank you. It seems like Councillor Graves' questions have been answered. Councillor Holmes?
Thank you, Chair. You covered well some of the points I was going to make, but yeah, just to say this is about, it isn't about actually defunding, it's about prioritisation, and these are the schemes which we want to take forward, amply funded via the HSF that we received. Tens of millions of pounds are being invested right now across the whole of Derby via City Fibre. That's going to be a transformational change that will drive a digital agenda and many, many positive things in the years to come. And, you know, also, you know, from my point of view, I know we're pursuing the elements that we aren't necessarily talking about here in this report. We're already pursuing those. So, you know, I'm positive that they will be delivered. They're just going to be delivered in other ways. And, you know, for me, I feel very, very positive about everything that was previously in our bid and currently in our bid by this report, Chair.
Thank you. And actually, only yesterday's Telegraph highlighted around £700 million worth of investment that's coming to the city as part of the recovery plan, which cannot be sniffed at, and it certainly indicates a bright city, a bright future for our city. Paul Simpson, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To be fair, I think a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, but I think it is worth re-emphasising that, as has been described, David said this right at the beginning of the presentation, this is about a pipeline of schemes for Derby. So whilst we've had to prioritise the amount of funding allocated to our original priorities in terms of the future High Street Fund, that doesn't mean that these things won't go ahead, and we will, as Councillor Holmes has just indicated, be pursuing other opportunities. And the ask of government will continue. There will be a continual pipeline of things that we look to bid for. You know, OCOR is another case in point. We haven't got all of the money to complete that. We're going to come on and talk about that later on, but we're not going to sit on our hands and rest on our laurels until we find the money to make that scheme happen, because it's absolutely critical, one, for flood defences in Derby, but also two, to sustainable development further down the river. So we have to keep pushing really, really hard. I think the other thing I would say, and just picking up on the point you've made, Chair, is, you know, yes, of course, we need to bang the door down and kick it down if we have to in terms of asking for more public sector funding, and we will continue to pursue that option. But part of this is about working in partnership, and it's about giving confidence to the private sector for the private sector to invest. This all can't be resolved. The challenges that we face that have been alluded to won't all be resolved by government money alone. We have to build confidence in the city, and that investors want to come to the city. So, you know, the recent successes we've had in terms of the company that's relocating to Cubo, they're taking a whole floor in Cubo. Cubo will be virtually full now. That's only been open a year, and they're bringing 50 odd new jobs to the city centre, relocated from another part of the UK. Brilliant news for Derby, and we will continue to push. We're seeing the Beckett Well investment from the private sector. We're seeing Castle Ward, Nightingale Quarter, Smart Park. The list that was produced in the Evening Telegraph yesterday was really, really positive. It shows that there is a strong belief in this city. There's a strong commitment from the private sector to continue to want to invest in this city, and long may that continue. And we have to continue to build those partnerships to encourage people to come to Derby, invest in the city, alongside the significant investment that the council and other public sector partners continues to play in. So I think it's about making sure that those partnerships continues to be really, really strong. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So some good discussion there around a very, very important item for the city, with some very positive news alongside it, and we are determined to drive those positive messages forward and rebuild our city. So we've got recommendations 2.1 to 2.4. Are we okay with those, Cabinet?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Super,
Chair,
thank you.
Chair, could I just clarify on the scrutiny recommendations? You were noting recommendation and accepting recommendation 1. What was the position on recommendation 2?
Well, we will put that to Cabinet entire, so we're absolutely clear, but my suggestion is that it's not necessary for us to write to government in these circumstances. Our focus should be around bidding on the opportunities that government are already presenting. Any contrary view to that, Cabinet?
No, Councillor.
No. Okay, so we're not accepting the second recommendation, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to item 12, the medium-term financial plan. And Alex, if I'm not mistaken, there were no recommendations in relation to this item?
That's correct, Chair. There's no further recommendations until item 15.
Okay, thank you. So, Simon, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you're aware, in December, against a very difficult backdrop, the Council had to issue a budget for consultation, and that went out for consultation between the 16th of December and the 17th of January. We also provided some extension to businesses to respond as well, following a very good and engaging session with 47 businesses there. Just to maybe give the headlines of what has changed. Just to confirm that this budget is recommending a revenue budget of 256 million and a capital budget over the next 3 years of 473 million. And the details of the financing of that is contained within the report. And in terms of the potential borrowing linked to it is linked in the next report. Just to maybe point members to where there have been changes. There are changes in the revenue budget detailed on page 12 and 13, including the investment of the additional 573,000 in free school meals approved by Cabinet in January. The tables also highlight a few other minor changes. On page 28, there are the changes in the capital programme, of which the major change is the inclusion of the HRA capital spend, which is significant to deliver more investment in a housing stock, more affordable homes, more social housing. That's been updated and included in this report. And that's on page 28. The report details, as per the recommendation from the January Cabinet, to increase council tax now by 4.99%. And that's subject to you recommending this budget to council will form the body of the council tax resolution. In addition, the budget has been updated for a series of plans about transforming the city around the recovery priorities through the flexible use of capital receipts. That's in Appendix 19, and that's the use of the flexibility to allow us to invest £2 million in the council's transformational objectives. But if I can just maybe highlight effectively what this report is asking Cabinet to look at in paragraph 2.1, and it's on page 3. It talks about, before recommending a budget to council, you should consider the outcomes of a budget consultation detailed in 8, 9, 10, and the scrutiny detailed in Appendix 11. Appendix 11 scrutiny had 4 recommendations from the executive scrutiny session on the 19th of January, which I'd ask you to consider. I think, as has already been mentioned, we are pleased with the budget consultation of the involvement of the young people, a really good explanation in there, the engagement of the business community, and also sort of the other engagements. So you should consider the outcomes of a budget consultation before reaching your decision tonight. As I've said, the outcomes of the executive scrutiny detailed in Appendix 11 you should be considering. The next bit is the Section 25 report of myself, the Section 151 officer, on the robustness of estimates and on the adequacy of the reserves. The report does detail that I am satisfied about the robustness of estimates, of how they've been drawn up, the savings proposals, and also the level of reserves that we have, which are in excess of the amount that we detail in that appendix. The report, that appendix also says that I strongly advise that there should be no planned recurrent use of reserves for 21-22 and the medium-term financial period, so I draw members' attention to that. And then the use of the Section 106 contributions detailed in Section 5.3.7. So in your deliberations, I ask you to consider those 4 items before you move on to recommendations from 2.2 onwards. And as I said, if after that deliberation, if you were to agree with recommendations in a report, this then forms the basis of a council tax resolution going to council in a couple of weeks' time, and the impact on on the council tax bands is detailed in the report. And I suppose finally, Chair, this report also details the dedicated schools grant and allocation of a dedicated schools grant, and has been worked up in conjunction with the schools forum, has been worked up in our SEN partnerships and everything else. And though we are experiencing pressures in the high needs block, this budget does present a picture where some of those pressures are being managed by the transformational activities that we have. So I'm happy now to end the introduction of the report, and along with the portfolio holder, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Ralston, you've indicated to speak, so, and Simon's emphasised the need for us to particularly take into account the recommendations at 2.1 in relation to the consultations, and specifically within that the Executive Scrutiny Board recommendations of the 19th of January. I'm not aware of any suggested changes, significant changes to the budget on the back of the consultation. Are you in a position to address that and otherwise make your contribution?
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. Just on the outcomes that we need to consider here, I think in terms of the budget consultation, as we've seen Appendix 8, page 83, we did, obviously that consultation ran for a month, but we did only receive 33 responses. Although we'd obviously had hoped to receive more, I believe this shows that the public do not see this as a contentious budget, and I hope that the lack of comments reflects the administration presenting a well-rounded budget that has no significant impact on statutory services. Apologies, I've just realised my camera is off, and I will start that for you. There we go. In contrast to the public consultation, on the 22nd of January, when we met with the business community and the partners, it was hosted by Marketing Derby, and we had 47 representatives of the business community and bondholders in attendance, and they were significantly increased from engagement we've had in the past. I mean, the previous year, for example, we had just 2 or 3 members, and those that I've been to in the past have only had a handful of members, so it was good to have that feedback and engagement with the business communities. And during that consultation, we answered a number of questions and queries, but overall the feedback was really very positive, and there was a recognition of both the impact of COVID and the pressure that's brought to the council, but the positive steps that the council plans as part of the ongoing investment and the overall recovery for the city. John Falcon, who was the host of the consultation, invited any other comments to be submitted by the 9th of February, and again we only received a further 3 comments. One of the truly interesting consultation elements that is shown on Appendix 10 was that was carried out by the Voices in Action Youth Council. I personally felt that the contribution was insightful and well considered, and was an excellent example of how our young voices gives confidence that the representatives of the future for the Derby City Council positively inform the decision making of today. So I'd just like to personally thank them and hope that we can involve Voices in Action further with further consultations in the future, because I believe they made a really valid points on the elements of the contribution that they made. So all that being considered, you know, there wasn't any significant outliner of issues raised. Obviously, the council tax was one element, and with that, you know, we've discussed how we originally came to budget proposal with a 4.49. Those changes that have been identified and those pressures identified through the school meals projects over the school holidays have been considered and therefore been implemented into this, which meant that we did have to increase that to the 4.499%. In relation to item B, the outcomes of the executive scrutiny on the 19th of January, the first recommendation, I personally believe we need to discount that, as I believe the approach that we've presented at the recent cabinet has found a balanced way of supporting our families in need,
whilst being in line with the council's pressures. Item 2 of the recommendations from scrutiny. Obviously, this is an aspiration to replenish our reserves, but in a period where our financial gap was thought to be approximately 3 million in February of 2020, but obviously we've then since had the COVID pressures, a significant increase in social care pressures and other financial pressures that we've been faced with a £30 million challenge. With support from the government funding, the need to raise council tax and make savings of over 9 million, we've been able to present a balanced budget with no recurrent planned use of reserves. But with that, is there no, at the moment, would be that with no foreseeable way of replenishing the reserves at this stage. Item 3 of the recommendations obviously refers to the free school meals again, and as I've discussed previously, the impact of those plans to support families have now been added within the budget in the way that we felt best appropriate. Item 4 was to recommend that Council Cabinet that it applies the philosophy of invest now and save for the future of the renewal in the Ravensdale Infant School. Obviously, we'd like to do this subject to affordability. We've committed to sprinklers, and we look to the opportunity to make and rebuild as carbon free as possible. So we can obviously note that. Item 6C, of the recommendations here that we need to consider is the Section 25 report to the Section 151 officer. The clear indicator for me and what stands out is the comments that's been repeatedly made that during the report, Section 151 officer and Appendix 6 at page 70, 4.18 makes it very clear that the Section 151 officer would not recommend any planned reoccurrent use of reserves, which has had obviously an impact on the decision making that we bring the budgets to. Obviously, the final one is the D, the use of the Section 106 contributions, and that's detailed in the Section 5.3.7, which are there for us to consider as well, but there's no comments from me on that. And subject to any comments from the rest of the Cabinet, I recommend that the Council approves the budget. We as a Cabinet approve to take this budget to Council, apologies, at the next full Council meeting. Okay,
thank you very much. In the absence of any contribution from other group leaders, it seems that they, as normal, are looking to keep their powder dry in relation to their issues in relation to the budget for a future meeting, which I hope...
No, absolutely not. Chair, I was waiting for you to ask us if we wanted to speak.
I've got no indication in the chat line yet, Maggie. So can I just finish in saying what I was saying? I hope that contribution at the future full council meeting reflects the positivity in this budget. It is a good budget. It's a remarkable budget in the circumstances, and we have to thank the officers responsible for putting it together in a climate and a circumstance whereby they've had massive other commitments as a result of COVID and the grants and the requirements put on us by government in relation to dealing with them. It's a massive achievement to be able to get to this stage at this time. And then I guess the only other thing to add for me is my thanks to the public, those that were engaged in the process, the consultation, particularly the young people of Voices in Action, if you take that back for me, Priya, and also our business colleagues who are far more than normal have engaged in this budget process. So that said, I still haven't got an indication. You want to speak, Peggy?
I can write it in the chat if that's what you prefer, Chair.
No, I'm happy to.
Petty, but if that's what you'd prefer.
As if I'd be petty, Peggy. It's just the normal practices to indicate in the chat line. Carry on.
Apart from when a cabinet member wants to talk over somebody. Thank you, Chair.
Are you ready for your contribution, Councillor?
It's a bit worrying that you continue to call this budget remarkable. What's remarkable is how depleted the reserves have become in the last 2.5 years. This administration has been in charge. I've never known it in my almost 13 years as being a councillor that the reserves have been depleted so badly. You relied on reserves to balance budgets at the start of financial years, and then you've raided reserves at the end because you failed to manage overspends. You're right, we will, in the right time, have a more detailed debate and discussion at full council as per the council's constitution. We will do that. I'm sure other groups will do that in the past, and you yourself have done that in previous years. We will make positive contributions to this budget to hopefully improve it, but I suspect this will fall on deaf ears, just as the paper earlier on providing food for our children has fallen on deaf ears. The most shameful part of this, and Councillor Rolleston has just confirmed it, you're pinning a 0.5% increase on the back of hungry children in our city. I think it's this disgusting use of words and terminology, and putting that, blaming them children for that 0.5% increase to maximise the amount of money you can get from Derby's taxpayers, again, despite giving manifesto commitments to only implement the very minimum council tax increase. In the years you've been in charge, you've actually implemented the maximum amount and not the minimum amount. So we'll have that debate in due course. But one question I would put today, because a lot has been said in the report and by the Cabinet member responsible for not using reserves in a reoccurring manner. Can anybody point out in the last few years where we have relied on the use of reserves in a reoccurring manner?
I can give a factual answer if you want, Chair.
Sorry, Chris, I'm happy to answer as well after Simon.
If you wish, Simon, yes.
Okay, just to give an answer, in the 18-19 budget, the planned, there's a planned contribution to reserves of 877. In 1920, there was a use of reserves of 7.492 planned. That was, as we said in that budget report, in respect of a one-off collection fund deficit. In 2020-21, there is a planned use of 2772. Again, that's purely for a one-off collection fund deficit. And in this budget, there's the planned use of about 1.7 million, again, in respect of a collection fund deficit. And so in terms of planned use to support services, as opposed to the impact of timing of receipts and other things in respect of collection of business rates and council tax, there has been no planned use of reserves to support the main budget requirements over those years. I can share those figures with Councillor Shanker if he wants after this meeting.
Thank you. If you do that afterwards, that would be good. Councillor Ralston.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. I think there's some clarity needed here around the reality check for Councillor Shanker. I think that we've been open and honest and transparent about the fact that we have continued to express the rationale and reasoning for having to increase council tax, and that hasn't just been the use of the free school meals element. There is a combination of issues, particularly around our looked after children, our increase in social care overspends and pressures. There are a number of issues that the local people here in Derby will recognise as a need to support our locality working and be able to continue to do that. In relation to reserves, I find it really interesting, Councillor Shanker, that you continue to state that that planned use of reserves is not ideal. Now, in 17-18, when you were the Cabinet Member for Finance, you planned to use £5.268 million of reserves, and indeed the pressures that you faced from adult services at that time were £3.9 million. And indeed you did use reserves in that year of 3.7 million. Now, in comparison, when we look at the following year in 18-19, we planned to replenish reserves by 0.877, so we weren't planning to use reserves. However, there was a significant pressure excuse me, I will continue talking about interrupting Mr. Shanker. There was a significant pressure of 8.420 of children's social care pressures, which is twice as much pressure on that service, and yet we only used £4.5 million, which was slightly increased from your prior use of the reserves. The following year, we did have a number of pressures on the system, and as Simon rightly points out, that is mainly when we planned the reserves, planned for use of reserves at that time. It was a one-off collection fund deficit that we're facing again, a much smaller figure this year, but that was 7.4 million. Now, within that year, we have faced another 7.9 million pounds of social care overspend and pressures on the system, and throughout the year we reduced that, and we did have to use the reserves at 13.68. So the combination of these, and the following year again there was a planned use of only 2, which again was in respect of the collection fund, but again the pressures on children's services social care overspend was 8 million. Now the rationale behind those was very significant, because the number of looked after children during that time from 1718 to 2021 increased from 470 to 640 children. We also had a UAS increase of our unaccompanied asylum seekers, which raised from 2 at the time in 1718 to 46. They have a massive impact on the financial budgets, and they are a very big very big part of the rationale for having to use the reserves, and nobody could have predicted that at the time into the position that we were in 2020-21, and therefore going into this. So actually, to have a budget with no planned reoccurrent use of reserves, unlike 1718, indeed 1617, indeed 1516 and 1415, you'll see that this is actually a really good budget, and I stand by a remarkable word, as Chris says.
Okay, so there you have your answer, Councillor Shanker. And in terms of the word remarkable, if you're looking for remarkable, if you don't believe Derby's budget is remarkable, just have a look over the border at Nottingham City's Labour-controlled council. Now that's remarkable, because that's £60 million black hole. So Derby's quite lucky.
I'm elected on Derby City Council, Chair, and I think you're elected for Derby City Council as well.
Okay, and that's why we do a good job in Derby, and we've produced a remarkable budget that is to be applauded in relation to the way that's been put together. So
just one further question then for the Cabinet.
Sorry, excuse me, Councillor Shanker, this is not Handforth Council.
Sorry,
I'm in the chair of this meeting, and you've had your contribution, you've had your answers. So,
just ask for one further question in the chat.
I need to move on, Councillor Shanker. Is there any, in the absence of any other contributions from any other leaders? Then I'm going to put the recommendations 2.1 to 2.7 to Cabinet. Can those be agreed, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so moving on, that takes us, I guess, to item 13. Yes, Treasury Management Investment Strategy. Simon.
Thank you for this, Chair. Members will be aware that the Council annually have to set a Treasury Management Strategy, a capital strategy, and prudential borrowing permissions. That gives the Council a very clear direction on balancing sort of a security, risk and return. And those three are deliberately in that order, that we will prioritise security of our funds. We will take a proportionate view of risk by taking the appropriate advice and only investing in counterparties that we feel are robust and where money return is not outweighing the risk of us losing money, and then we have a return. This strategy does have the interesting challenge, as you know, that the financial markets are giving very low returns at the moment, in terms of about 0.1% if we're lucky. And during last year, there has been a situation where there have been negative interest rates offered by the Debt Management Office, which is a government's branch of the Public Works Loan Board. Having said that, this council, over many years and many colours of administration, have been able to underborrow using internal investments to offset more expensive borrowing, and that has continued during the course of 2020-21 and will continue into at least part of 21-22, and that is shown in the table, which is called the capital financing requirement, which shows an underborrowing. This strategy also picks up the ability for us to invest in things, projects or investments that will benefit the city, whether that be social housing, commercial investment, regeneration, climate change, and it provides the flexibility for that. The indicators at the end of this again also talk about how we are supporting our capital programme of 479 million with an element of potential borrowing and how they impact on a range of the indicators. So this is a fairly technical report that we have to bring to both Cabinet and also to Council in due course, and I'm happy to take any questions on it.
So any questions, any contributions? Alex, just to confirm, no recommendations from last night?
That's correct, Chair.
Nothing in the chat box. In that case, then we've got recommendations 2.1 to 6. Can those be agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Moving on then to item 14 on the Simon Road, shows Q3 financial monitoring for general fund capital budgets.
Yeah, I'm almost having to turn on the light here because the light's fading, but I'll wait for that. So thank you for this, and this is the budget monitoring report for Q3. The headline messages is that despite the impact of COVID and demand pressures, this shows a reduction in the overspend from Q2 to Q3. And if you have a look at the report, it details that, as the portfolio holder said in terms of a budget report, that the continued and main pressure on the council remains social care placements in terms of a number, and by implication the number for market to meet those needs. And as we have said in previous budget monitoring reports, the need sometimes to place children in a secure environment, not secure, locked up, but in independent residential and independent foster care provision, and the budget talks about how we're trying to recommission that market. The rest of the budget is obviously showing an underspend, which allows the drawdown on the budget risk reserve to be less than forecast last time, and that's encouraging. The report details service by service where the main variances are, and it also provides an update in terms of the capital programme. The capital programme spend is still lower than we would have hoped in terms of the original capital ambition of the council. Some of that is impacted on by COVID, some are issues still where profiling expenditure and funding into the financial year with all the dependencies could be improved, and that's a priority that has been detailed in this report and in the budget report for the next financial year. So our budget spend is probably around sort of 40% of the approved capital programme and needs to remain a priority. The report also details reserves, and it details the dedicated schools grant. But the main message is that against a very difficult year, the council is reducing the call on reserves to balance the budget, which is primarily social care, and also the latest indication in the COVID return to government that we did is that we can contain our COVID expenditure within the funding provided by government. Happy to take any questions.
Good, thank you, Simon. So another overall positive financial report. Any comments, contributions? Alex, again, just to confirm, no recommendations from last night?
Yeah, that's correct, no recommendations.
Okay, nothing in the chat bar, although Councillor Shanker's typing apparently.
I'll put it in the chat bar just to keep you happy, Chair.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Look forward to this positive contribution, Councillor.
Yeah, I'll be as positive as I can. I can't be positive about a £6.4 million overspend, and I can't be positive about only spending £58 million or investing £58 million into the city when we're budgeted to invest £183 million by the year end. We have this conversation at every outturn report. Yourself and the cabinet member for finance will give us commitments. We're on target to spend the revised estimate, and I'll say now your revised estimate of 127.769 million is over optimistic. We need to get a grip of our capital expenditure because it does have revenue implications as well going forward. We need to get better at that collectively. It's no individual's responsibility, but it needs the leadership to get to grips with this matter and sort it out. And we can't be positive by a £6.4 million overspend because we should be budgeting better at the beginning of the year. We know the issues and we need to make them decisions at the beginning of the year so we're not relying on reserves. And it's your position you've created, because next year, you know what, you're not going to have that amount of money in the reserves because they're so depleted to rely upon.
It's actually, Councillor Shanker, is one area in which the capital budget we're at one, because I share your, and have done forever, your concerns around our ability to spend that capital project budget that's projected. But it may or may not have escaped your notice that in the last 12 months there have been one or two fairly unusual challenges that may have affected our ability to meet the requirements of the capital budget. It's work in progress. We've already made some significant changes to the capital programme, and we will continue to review it and improve the situation in relation to the capital programme. So, Councillor Ralston, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely, Councillor Shanker. This isn't something that has happened overnight. You yourself recommended to me when I first became Cabinet Member. I remember a conversation just outside the Council House where you identified this issue to us, and we agreed with yourselves that the capital spend in line with the actual spend in the year does need to be reviewed. I openly admit that this financial year has been a significant challenge on this council, but there are conversations around reprofiling that capital spending, and by Q1 and by the very final Q2 of next year, we've planned to bring a fully reassessed capital programme budget to you, because we identify that there are some reprofiling that needs to be achieved within the council, and there are significant works around the relationship building and honesty and being able to clarify the use of how we are going to spend that capital budget. But it is clear that we continue to try and do our best to regenerate the city, and the capital programme will be a significant factor in that. And we want to get that right. We want to work with you and any other party members that will be able to support us in bringing that as a clear cross-parted project to the city in the future, because inevitably, you know, one day this may all be your problem, Councillor Shanker, and then we hopefully will be able to continue to work on the projects that have been set in the future. In terms of the other thing that you mentioned, I'll just let you come back in and remind me of the other item that you questioned on there, Shanker, please.
Do I have the Chair's permission?
You do. I'm sure.
Thank you. So the first item was around the revenue budget and the continued overspending that budget, and that reserves won't be there next year if you continue to overspend like you have in the last 2 years.
I think absolutely. Again, as we've said in the past, as I said a moment ago, there has been significant pressures on the council within those couple of years around children looked after children, from 460 to I'll get those numbers up in front of me again, 470, sorry, to 640, which, as you can appreciate, is a significant increase. But part of that is also around building this into the budget, making sure that we look to the future so that it doesn't become, there are no surprises, and there is a lot of transformational work that is planned in that will hopefully bring some savings or future savings into the council, which allow us to achieve the budget that we're setting out here today. Councillor Poulter, you are on mute.
Sorry about that. In the absence of any comments or questions, excuse me, we have recommendations 2.1, 2.2 to agree, Cabinet.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay,
Agreed.
thank you. Moving on then to item 15, I believe. Yes. Derby Recovery Plan. Who's going to be doing this one?
I'll pick this up, Chair, if I may.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, really pleased to be able to present the Derby Recovery Plan to Cabinet for approval. This has been discussed previously and has been out for consultation, and it obviously represents the city's response to the COVID situation, which we've obviously been dealing with now for the best part of a year, and it's aimed at both short, medium, and longer term recovery for the city, focused around the three key recovery priorities, which are our place, our people, and of course the council itself. And that has been aligned closely with the existing framework of the council's delivery plan that was covering the period between 2019 and 2023. As I said earlier, in relation to the future high street funding, this recovery plan and the approach that the City Council continues to adopt and encourage is about the importance of working with our city. It's not about looking inwards, it's about reaching out to partners, to the community sector, to the business community. And I think COVID, despite the massive challenges that it's brought to everybody's personal and professional lives, has also brought out the best in people. And I think that's something that we can all be incredibly proud of and have been able to play our part in that. And there's been some fantastic examples which we've mentioned many times. So this is about, you know, harnessing that positivity and harnessing that approach, that working with the city, not doing unto, but working with, and an increased focus on outcomes. And in relation to the point that's just been debated around the capital programme, I too would support the comments of the leader and Councillor Shanker in ensuring that, you know, we are better at delivery. And I've said to my senior team, our focus has to be about delivery. Yes, of course, COVID it's not an excuse. I don't think that we can use it as an excuse, but it's certainly hindered our ability to move forward on some of the key projects. But even more important, therefore, that we proceed at pace wherever possible to deliver for the city, and again reiterate some of the real positive messages that came out over the last few days. We have got some really aspirational plans for this city. We need to now get on with them and deliver them, and that's certainly one of the key focuses of my job as chief exec. It is about remaining dynamic, because the situation is going to flux and change over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, and we will have to find as a society, I guess, ways of living with COVID. It's not going to go away. It's just something that we're now going to have to it's going to be part of our daily lives, whether we like that or not. And so we do need to continue to respond to those emerging circumstances and the impact that this will have on us personally and professionally. The covering report sets out the feedback that we've received as part of the consultation that I mentioned, and we've taken into account some of the changes, and they're highlighted in the appendix to the report. And the recommendations, Chair, are set out in 2.1 to 2.4, and obviously I commend the report to Cabinet for approval. Thank you. You're muted, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Alex, I think there are a couple of recommendations on this one from last night, but
Yeah,
just if you could put them up, I'll bring in Priya because I think she's indicated she wanted to speak on this, and then I'll bring in Martin to introduce the recommendations from last night. So Priya.
Yeah, so me and Connie spoke on the phone about this, or about all of the items, but this one in particular, it was brought to our attention under Supporting Information 4.2, Thriving Children and Young People. I don't know how much you'll be able to tell us now, but like you said, there's no one that's not been affected by this, and whilst there's been positive things, you know, having to go through schooling the way we have, especially, you know, me and Connie are both in year 13 and our exams have been cancelled. So what I'm trying to say, what we want to get across is that we need to make sure that everyone's all right, like in terms of mental health, because it's not that's ever happened before, and probably hopefully not like anything that will happen again. And I know people that, you know, are the most amazing, funny, bubbly people who have been affected by this. So I don't know if we can talk about it outside of Cabinet. Maybe it'll be better to, but if there are any initiatives once we go back into schools to do with mental health. Thank you.
Priya, again, fantastic contribution. Thank you. Let me put it this way. I can remember some of my childhood, but there are members of the council who can remember more of theirs. But certainly I've heard many recognitions of the fact that people your age and school agers lives have been seriously disrupted by this, and you know, even adult workforce are under stress, under strain by the changes that COVID's brought about, and we should absolutely not lose sight of the effects of this on our school children. I'm thinking that maybe Councillor Williams may have some thoughts about this and how it may, something along these lines, as if it hasn't already been brought to Voices in Action to look at and get detailed views from you all as to why your concerns lie and to see what we can do about it. So Yvonne, did you want to come on this at all?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, Priya raises an absolutely relevant point, and it does talk about in 4.2 the thriving children, young people, and to when they need support, to make sure that they are able to access the right service. And we do have teams currently working on looking at the kind of mental health provision that we currently have, but also what we were expecting to have in the future. But I'm absolutely happy to go to Voices in Action to get some ideas from the Voices in Action team there to find out what it is they think we need, because sometimes, you know, it might be completely different to what might have been organised on a statutory level. So happy to take that on, but to say thank you very much to Priya and to Voices in Action for bringing these questions to us. It's very important and very courageous to not stand up, but to come into a meeting and to be able to ask those really important questions and to make sure that our focus is in the right area. So thank you.
Okay, I think maybe Councillor Ralston indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Priya, I think you've brought up one of the biggest points of COVID, post-COVID, that we're going to have to deal with. From myself, I've always been a self-appointed and previously appointed chair of mental health, champion of mental health, and I know exactly the feelings that are happening with people at the moment. I can't imagine some of the impact that has had on you. But there, you know, last week I think it was actually the
Children's Mental Health Week, and I know that many councillors posted some information, and I will share that with you to share with your colleagues on Voices for Action. And they were some telephone contact numbers for the places like Young Minds, Crisis Messenger, Thymex and Childline, Samaritan's Mind and Young Minds. There are some contact details there, but there is an awful lot of work to be done around this, and I think some of the works that we are pulling together at the moment in relation to Better Together, even some of the ideas and concepts around the Poverty Commission isn't just around financial poverty, it's around mental health and well-being poverty, and making sure that everybody has access to support. And I think it would really be great if yourself, I'm sure Councillor Williams will be really interested to get together and sit together and look at what it is that that we can do to support the young generation of the city, because I see not only in yourself but in children of younger ages. I have 3 children, and they too, aged 11, 12 and 13, have also been affected, and the impact of that lack of social interaction does have a massive impact on the younger generation, and we need to help and support them as best we can. So thank you again for bringing that to our attention today.
Okay, good. So Councillor Repton, did you want to introduce the recommendation from last night?
Yeah, I think it's just as it's printed, Chair, it's self-explanatory. And Heather is with us this evening. She was there last night, and I think has agreed to incorporate the essence of this. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so just to go through it, and Paul, you've presented the report, but maybe Councillor Holmes has got some thoughts on it. Obviously, we're trying to embed decarbonisation and reduction in our carbon footprint in everything we do. I'm not au fait with exactly what the current plan says and whether or not it needs to be updated. Matt, have you any thoughts, and Paul, in relation to if it needs to be strengthened with this, but in this way?
I think this is one, Chair, for the Working Party, actually, Decarbonisation Climate Change Working Party, which is cross-party. Very positive with the independent chair, actually. Very positive dialogue so far, from what I can gather. I do dip in, but try not to interfere too much, because I want it to be genuinely ideas coming from cross-party back to the Cabinet and the Council officers to implement policy, and also put suggestions forward with the £3 million of capital spend that we have. So that's one thread, and clearly they are embedded within the recovery plan and the overarching group of people that we've put together. So for me, I would definitely steer towards that particular group to draw up what they would like to see the council do, and we can work with them.
Chair, if I may, I think as Heather's put in the chat, the recommendation is really to simply reflect in the main document what's already in the action plan. So I think what's being asked for here is really just a tidying up exercise. The action is already there around the net zero carbon strategy, as I understand it, and it's just reflecting that in the main document. So and obviously what Councillor Holmes has just said, I think we can obviously follow up on that as well in terms of sharing that with the action group. So I don't think it's not, as I understand it, Heather might want to just clarify, but as I understand it, I don't think it's giving us any other commitments that don't already exist. But Heather might want to come in and just clarify that.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Paul. Yep.
Okay, anything else to add, Heather?
No, nothing additional from me. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, I don't see any other indications. So that leaves us with recommendations, I think 2.1 to 2.4. We can accept the recommendation from corporate scrutiny last night. And Cabinet, are you okay with the recommendations attached to the report?
Certainly.
Agreed.
Okay, good.
Great.
So, item 16 then is in relation to Our City, Our River, OCOR. Who's going to do this one for us?
So, Chair, I'm just going to lead on this, and I'm ably supported by Sarah Banks, who is knows this project in intimate detail. But I'll just give the overview, if that's okay, Chair, of the report. So this relates to the Our City, Our River programme, and it's a relatively simple recommendation. It's actually to approve acceptance of an additional £10 million of grant funding from the Environment Agency, and what this effectively enables us to do is deliver a further stage of works in the programme. I think now, I'm sure Sarah will confirm, but I think we're now up to a total of something like 63 million of the 95, which the total programme equates to, and this will take us into the next key stage of Derby Riverside, and taking it to full planning consent, and the mitigating works associated with that phase of the programme. I think there are some conditions associated with the funding, in that we have to prioritise the Environment Agency funding over other sources. We have to understandably progress the works as soon as we possibly can, and we also have some contractual commitments around outputs, but the Environment Agency are clear in our position that we can't guarantee the outputs. I don't know, Sarah, if there's anything more you wish to add to my kind of headlines. Are you there, Sarah? If you are, Sarah,
sorry, yes, I'm there. Sorry, I had myself on mute, embarrassing me. Yeah, it's around paragraphs really, 4.11 and onwards, really, where we talk about the expectations and the obligations in accepting the funding, and that's a result of ongoing discussions since the offer of the funding towards the end of last summer. It's just been very clear about what the council can or can't really do with the additional 10 million, which is a great significant contribution, but actually it still doesn't fill the funding gap in order for us to be able to achieve the expected outcomes at this point in time. So we've been very clear with the Environment Agency, and they fully understand and still support us, that there is a funding gap, so we cannot give a categorical sort of assurance that we will be able to complete the works at this point in time within this next 6-year programme, but obviously we're making every effort to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. It was obviously an absolutely critical programme for the city. It can make some massive contributions to the further development across the city, and one we should absolutely support wherever we possibly can, because it has the potential to be even more transformational than it's been already. And alongside that, of course, we had another near miss a couple of weeks ago in terms of river levels, not quite November 2019, but if nothing else, the defence of the city is critical there. So, Councillor Holmes, I think you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a few points. Firstly, it's a nationally recognised scheme as being unique in the way that we're delivering this as an authority, and you know that has led to various interests. Future Floods conference last year, or was it the year before? I can't remember. Time has flown. At that conference, and since then, we've reiterated the fact that this is a regeneration project as well as a flood defence project, and that is unique. And you know, it's something which is absolutely right for the city, and means even more now as we move out of COVID into COVID recovery. But I would just like to say, Chair, that I was a cabinet member back in 2010. When officers brought this project out and suggested that maybe politicians have a very short-sighted sort of cycle in terms of projects, and this was something which at the time was going to deal with a potential 200-year event, and it was a hard sell, you know, a major commitment to the council, money that we didn't have. But I felt, along with officers, that it was the right thing to do, and I was very proud at that time to actually launch this back in 2010. Obviously, cabinet members have worked very hard in the interim with various administration since then, but I'm absolutely delighted to be leading on this again 10 years later, and I'd like to express my thanks to officers for their absolutely amazing work over the last decade. What they have achieved is just astonishing for this city, and it's already, as Councillor Barker has said in the chat, proven its worth. And you know, I'm delighted that we're moving forward now with another large investment from government. You know, and I look forward to now delivering further phases of the scheme. Thank you.
Good. So, Councillor Graves, welcome to the meeting.
Hello there, Chris. Thanks. I think it would be remiss of me to highlight the fact that obviously we haven't got enough to fulfil the requirements that we needed to in phase 2, and it, you know, as I pointed out all them years ago, Councillor Holmes may remember that I was a little concerned about phase 3, because phase 3 involves Alveston, and Alveston was there was clearly not enough money allocated at the very beginning of this project, and the fact that we're not getting enough money at this stage also makes me more concerned about the south of the city, and whether we're going to be either cut back on the flood defences that we need, or indeed just let to some people say hang out to dry, but maybe to hang out to wet. I don't know, and it is a concern of mine. And like I said, it would just be remiss of me not to mention the fact that we do need enough funding to finish phase 3.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe Sarah might have some thoughts on that. She's been part of that for 10 years and absolutely aware of the worries and concerns about displacement of water by the defences further downriver. So did you want to comment, Sarah?
Yeah, just to say that Councillor Graves, I'm aware of the discussions that we had, and certainly trying to get through the original the hybrid planning application, the concerns that were raised, and I think within the council there's still some concern with the officers of what the proposals are as part of the, if you like, acquired EA proposals for making space for water around the Alveston Park facilities. We as a team certainly haven't forgotten, and we've been trying to work since we got the original tranche of money, looking at where elements of Oak Hall can be delivered, if you like, at piecemeal, and we've sort of finished with the cherry picking now. We can't deliver anything further than what we're doing now at the Mill Fleam, which is the next stage, and we've got to, you know, deliver Derby Riverside before we can even go on downstream, and there's no way we could deliver elements of that before then, really. So we're fully aware. There's some quite interesting photographs that we've been provided very recently by the Environment Agency, which demonstrate or show quite visibly. There's some drone shots taken over the Darley playing fields and Package 1 area, which I'll forward and share to everybody, because it clearly shows the defences working, which from our perspective it's been a massive investment, and again from the Environment Agency's perspective you can clearly see the water being held back from people's homes, and again what we want to do is achieve that for the whole of the city, not stop at the end of each stage. So certainly as from the team's perspective, Package 3 hasn't vanished, we're just slowly eating our way down river, if you like, so getting there.
Good. Thank you, Sarah. Any other questions or observations? No. In that case, then we've got recommendation 2.1. Are we comfortable, Cabinet, to accept this funding?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Super. So that leads on my listing agenda item 18, which I understand may be confidential. Alex, can you put up the information I need to read out to exclude the public, please? So for the following item, I'm asking that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following item on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Perhaps, Karen, you can confirm when the broadcast has stopped.